Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just wait another minute or two. I can see people are still joining in on the conference call. All right, I think we have reached a good quorum. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tim Doberman. I'm the Director of Research at the International Growth Center. And with us, we have several members from IGC's research program team. And it's wonderful to see such interest in our call for proposals. As you know, or may know, IGC has an annual call for proposals, and we're always excited to see the great ideas and projects that come from around the world that we're able to fund and support. So what we'll do for today's session is we'll go through some of the basic pieces of information that will hopefully help you prepare your proposal, but also answer any questions that you may have about the types of projects and proposals we're looking for. And then I'll also go through and give a few tips for however much it's worth on what we think constitutes a good and compelling proposal. And we'll have around at least half an hour for an open Q&A, hopefully at the end of the session. So feel free to throw in questions in the Q&A feature along the way. We'll be responding to those during as well as after our presentation. But there will also be then an opportunity to ask questions directly at the very end. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Shahid. Shahid is the head of our research program, and he will be going through some of the details for this particular call for proposals. So over to you, Shahid.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, hi everyone. Really nice to see such an enthusiastic response to our webinar. If you could just go to the next slide, Tim. So this is just an outline of what we're going to be doing today. Tim's basically covered it. I'll start off with a few details about the call, pass on to Tim for some tips on how to write a good proposal. We'll then address some commonly asked questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from you. So I would strongly encourage you to put your questions in the question box at the bottom of your screen, and then hopefully we'll have a good chunk of time at the end to address them. So yeah, these are just some basic information about the call. It's open right now. We opened it about 3 weeks ago. And it will close at the end of September. So that's an important date for you to remember. And then we'll spend 2 to 3 months evaluating the proposals. They're evaluated jointly by our research directors, which are thematic experts in academia, as well as our country teams that provide a policy angle to the evaluations. And then we'll notify candidates of decisions at the sort of mid-January. So on eligibility criteria, it's an open call. Anyone is encouraged and allowed to apply. There's just a few basic criteria. It's open worldwide. We strongly encourage researchers based in developing countries, especially developing countries that have an IGC country office, to apply. One thing to note is that the lead PI for any proposal must have a PhD or is pursuing a PhD. Other members of the team, it's probably favorable if they have PhDs or are pursuing PhDs, but we will accept proposals for which there are master's students, for example. But the lead PI must have a PhD or pursuing a PhD. We're also strongly encouraging research applications, as I mentioned earlier, from researchers based in developing countries. We're really keen to improve our engagement with locally based researchers. So if there are locally based researchers on this call, we'd be keen to hear your questions about the application process as well. And then, research should align with IGC's themes and country priorities. We have a wealth of information on the website that I would encourage you to look at. It includes resources for researchers as well, on how to develop a good, compelling proposal. There's a document called Guidelines for Applicants on the website, on the Call for Proposals website, that we would very strongly encourage you to read, as well as our research strategy, which lays out our research priorities by theme and by sub-theme. So definitely have a look at that as you prepare your application. Next slide. So this is where the IGC works. We have 10 partner countries, and we have engagements in 3 other countries, Tanzania, India, and Yemen. All of this information, again, is up on the website. We generally favor proposals for countries in which we work in. However, we will also accept proposals in any other developing country, provided it's of exceptional quality. So it must have relevance for IGC countries and strong potential for academic impact and the ability to generate new knowledge on informing policy on sustainable growth across developing countries more broadly. So we will consider those applications as well. For just a specific note on Tanzania, India, and Yemen, we don't have country offices established there right now. So if you are interested in applying to those countries and you're unsure about whether your research aligns with the priorities for those countries, we have a document up on the website called Country Priorities, where you will find the specific policy priorities that we're interested in those 3 countries, as well as the 10 other more established IGC partner countries. So please have a look at that document as well. That's up on the website. And then full versus small research grants. So full research grants are fully self-contained research projects that will generate results that are appropriate for publication. So even if your project has a small budget and, for example, uses secondary data or administrative data where the costs can be considerably lower, but the sample size is appropriately large to generate results that have statistical significance, you should be applying for a large grant. Small grants are specifically for pilots and exploratory work. That is, first step research to better understand an issue or to test an intervention before you plan to scale it up. So the small grant award is capped at 30K. Large grants are capped at 125K. And then on our evaluation criteria, so alignment with research strategy. So we're really looking for proposals that hit the mark in terms of addressing IGC's research priorities. That means your research question should closely align with what we've outlined in our research strategy and in our country priorities that I've just mentioned. If you can clearly connect your project to these, then you're on the right track. Next is the quality of your research design. So this is all about the academic rigor and how solid your research design is. We're looking for projects that aren't just interesting on paper, but that also have methods likely to yield valid, reliable results. Basically, we need to see that your project has the potential to produce high quality, credible findings. Then there's 2 really important ones, policy and academic impact. On policy impact, we're assessing the potential for your research to have a real world impact. We want to know how important the policy target is and how engaged you are or plan to be with relevant policymakers, both now and in the future. So the closer you are to influencing policy, the better. Academic impact is also crucial. This isn't just about producing new knowledge. It's about significantly advancing the scientific understanding of your topic. We're interested in research that can contribute to the academic literature in a meaningful way, and ideally something that could be published in a good journal. We also value engagement with local institutions. I've mentioned this earlier. We prioritize proposals that involve local researchers. This could mean working with researchers embedded in a government ministry, partnering with a local institution. I would also strongly encourage you to reach out to our country teams to get feedback on your proposals. And helping them and getting their help in connecting you to policymakers as you develop your proposal as well. And then finally, value for money. We need to ensure that your budget is realistic and cost effective. We'll be asking ourselves questions like, is your budget proportional to the task? Could the same results be achieved for less? Are your costs reflective of local market rates? So yeah, it's very important that you demonstrate that your project offers good value for money. So these are the main things that we'll be looking at when we evaluate your proposal. So keep these criteria in mind as you put your proposal together, and then yeah, you'll be setting yourself up for success, hopefully. Next slide. So this is just on what the IGC focuses on. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. There's plenty of information up on the website. I'll just say that our main goal is to promote sustainable and inclusive economic growth. We're very focused on understanding what drives growth and identifying effective policies that can help countries develop in a way that enhances social, environmental, and economic well-being. We're particularly interested in projects that address environmental challenges across our 4 themes. And yeah, we strongly encourage research on strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So yeah, that's just our 4 themes over there. You can see what the descriptions look like. I'm not going to go over this in too much detail. All of this is outlined in our research strategy, which I strongly encourage you to take a look at. It really does provide a comprehensive overview of our priorities. We've also developed 4 evidence papers, one for each theme, that sort of summarize the current state of knowledge and highlight key gaps. So these documents are valuable resources for anyone looking to deepen their understanding of our work. So be sure to browse through these. They're full of insights that can, I think, significantly inform and guide your research and your application as well. I'll stop there. I'll pass on to Tim to just go through a few tips on how to write a strong grant proposal.
Great, thank you, Shahid, and great to see all the questions in the chat. Please keep them coming. So I will very briefly, in the next 10 minutes or so, try to give some general tips for preparing a proposal. For some of you, this may be well known and you're familiar with putting in proposals. For others, hopefully this might be some food for thought. What makes a compelling proposal? It's ultimately no objective answer to this question, but these are some of the points which we would conventionally look for, at least think about, as forming a compelling proposal. Now, of course, this is a big list, and you should think of this, the first 3 as being things that you should try to have, with some of the latter points, last bullet points being a bit more nice to have rather than must-haves. So the first element, and I'll spend much of my time today focusing on this, is that you need to have a clear, precise, and focused research question. You should be able to write down in a simple sentence what your paper or proposal is asking and answering. And this should be quite well defined. Many times when we're reviewing a proposal, it is actually very difficult, either because it is not spelled out clearly or because there's too many ideas floating around. It's very difficult for us to know what research question you are primarily trying to answer. The second thing we are looking for is that it expands our understanding on a given topic. We are not looking, we'd love to have them, but we're not expecting Nobel Prize winning ideas. What we're looking for is even small contributions to our understanding on a topic, such as cash transfers or understanding on what determines migration into cities. So as long as we are thinking that this proposal might allow us to learn a bit more, maybe in a new context or learning about a new mechanism at play, that is something that we would be very excited about. Now, in order to do this, you need to have a convincing and feasible methodology. Convincing in the sense that, is the approach that you're taking suitable to answer the research question you've identified? That might mean, if it's an empirical paper, looking at whether you have identification and are able to comment on a causal mechanism or relationship between 2 variables. But also, and I should stress this, we want to know if your methodology is feasible. We can all think of a perfect methodology to answer a research question, but implementing it is another question. So are you able to collect the data that is necessary to measure the outcomes of interest? Are you able to implement with the partner the type of experiment that allows us to isolate the impact of a particular program on an outcome, so on, so forth. So we really want to be able to see demonstrable evidence that you're able to implement and undertake the methodology that you are laying out. So those would be the core three ingredients: a clear question, the sense that it has important contributions, even in a small way, but important contributions to our state of knowledge on a topic, and then having the methodology that gives us confidence in your ability to answer this question and provide that evidence. Now, some of these next points, I think, are aspects which we just want to highlight, and some projects will have these, others will not. But some projects, for instance, emphasize novel data, collecting new types of data in an environment where there previously hasn't been this type of information before, which allows us to get new insights on the impact of a certain policy. This data could be remote sensing data. This could be administrative data from governments, but often some form of new data allows us to actually get some of these new insights that expand our understanding. Many proposals that get funded also have strong partnerships with government directly or other important stakeholders like NGOs. So if you look at IGC's historical research, some of our most exciting projects over the last 15 years have come from deep collaborations with institutions like BRAC in Bangladesh, which is a very large NGO that's been at the forefront innovating in solutions to fight poverty. But having this strong buy-in is helpful not only to deliver on an interesting research question, but it also gives us a good sense that this project will have impact, both in terms of practical impact, but also potentially policy impact. Now, this point actually should have been in the must-haves, the structured and organized proposal. But really, this sounds like a small thing, but I really just want to underline, take the time to make the proposal really nicely structured. So don't be shy to include subheadings. So if you're talking about methodology, you can have like a data section, a summary section, a data section, an empirical approach section, a model section, etc. So really break it out, add some spacing in the proposal where you can, make it organized and clear for a reviewer to assess. And then lastly, do not be afraid to be ambitious. We obviously want you to take risks. I think Chris Woodruff in another presentation for IGC and from Petal framed it very nicely in saying, as funders, we actually take a venture capital approach. We're happy to fund projects which we think are risky. Maybe they're not able to fully implement, or maybe we don't really know if this intervention will be successful. But if we get the sense that this is exciting, and if you demonstrate that ambition to do something exciting, we are also happy to take risks. Now, of course, be transparent about the risks that your project faces, but don't be scared of saying that we think this could be really great. There's a risk that A, B, and C might happen, which means we won't be able to get exactly where we want to, but that's completely fine. So really aim to develop something exciting and big. So what I want to do now in the last few minutes is actually just talk about a few more examples to start framing this. And the first thing I'll emphasize is what makes a good research question. Here is an example of what we would classify as a pretty good research question. So what is the impact of vocational training on youth unemployment in urban Ghana? It's focused because it targets a clear intervention, vocational training. It's policy relevant because the issue of youth unemployment is very pertinent in cities. It's very clear. There's only one thing that it's asking. What is the impact of vocational training on youth unemployment? It's not asking many things at once. As a result, it's immediately testable empirically. We can test whether the training has led to changes in employment levels. And it's building on an existing and a growing kind of cluster of research on how we can encourage youth employment in cities. So this is an example of a good research question. What might a less good or bad example be? Something very broad, like how can education improve economic development in Africa? So why is this a bad research question? It's not because the topic is not important. The topic is very important and fundamental to development, but it's not a good research question because it's very broad and unfocused. What do we really mean by economic development? You know, what aspects are being affected by education? What types of education? Is it primary education, tertiary education? It's really not specific. As a result, it doesn't actually have that much policy relevance. We don't know with this question, what is the policy action or recommendation we can give to a policymaker? When you have these imprecise or kind of open-ended types of questions, it's really hard to focus the research and hence focus the recommendation for policy. And ultimately, that makes it almost an impossible question to answer because it's so big, so broad, that there's no real methodology or approach that would give us confidence to be able to answer such a wide-ranging question. So now, to kind of keep a good memory alive as we transition, another example of a good research question would be the following, which is whether providing financial literacy training to female entrepreneurs in rural Kenya increases their business profitability and income. So notice a few things here. It's very clear on the intervention, financial literacy training. It's clear on the sample, who is being affected, female entrepreneurs in rural Kenya. It's clear on the outcome, business profitability and household income. So this tells us immediately what the program is, what the outcomes will be, the types of data you might need to gather, and allows us to already start piecing together whether this approach is feasible and doable. So this is just another example of a good research question. So really, I would encourage you to spend a disproportionate amount of time really nailing this one sentence. And I would have that sentence explicitly. So our proposal aims to answer this research question and then lay it out there and use this as a way to structure the following sections. So I now want to talk about a few points on methodology and approaches you can take. So IGC is very flexible in the methodologies that you can undertake. We do not require that you do RCTs or experiments, but what we do want to see is that the methodology you choose is best suited for answering your research question. So this could include surveys or emphasizing data collection and measurement. This could include, of course, RCTs and experiments that aim to establish causal relationships through controlled interventions. It could include other regression analyses or reduced form approaches that aim to take existing data or maybe survey data and control for confounding variables using a variety of approaches, whether that's instrumental variables, difference in differences, regression discontinuities, etc. But we also are quite keen to encourage structural work. So this means developing an economic model, taking data to this model and then using that model to better understand mechanisms or kind of the wider general equilibrium effects of different policies. And in some proposals, you have a combination or a mixture of all of these or some of these. So just to say, we're open on the approaches that you can adopt. But when you do start laying out the methodology in a proposal, just a few kind of points that we want to emphasize as well. So first is when you're talking about data and outcomes, please provide detail on how you're going to collect the data, the variables you'll be collecting. In particular, emphasis should be on the outcome variables, how you're measuring them. Sometimes an outcome is very obvious, household income. You can say we measure household income over the last 30 days. But other times, the outcome variables are defined quite broadly and makes it harder for us to assess whether your approach is feasible or not. If you're involving surveying work, please do talk about your sample and how you're selecting your sample. Or if you're using existing data, talk about how the sample you have may or may not be representative and what some of the shortcomings of that might be for us to think about the broader ability to generalize the results that you're finding. When you're doing an intervention, be precise as well with the exact intervention. Don't just say we provide skills training. Say exactly the type of training, the content of the training, etc. So you don't need to give the full detail, but let us know a little bit more about exactly what you're planning on doing and what that intervention is aiming for will be able to impact the outcome variable that we're interested in. So last few things on methodology. When you do talk about empirical specifications, please just be very clear and upfront about the assumptions that your approach makes. It is not the case that if you acknowledge potential shortcomings, that we will use this against you. If anything, that gives us confidence that you're aware that your approach might be valid under conditions A, B, and C, but if condition D holds, which could be a possibility, then your results might be affected in a certain way. For us as reviewers, that only shows critical engagement and gives us more confidence that the final result you will come up with has been a product of labor and lots of thought. And and I think this means going a little bit beyond just saying we include fixed effects to control for kind of unobserved variables that might be affecting a relationship. So really think about what might be missing if you just do fixed effects, or how fixed effects fundamentally also just changes your ability to interpret the results that you're getting. And the same kind of process applies for models. So if you're doing something more structural or based on modeling, just be clear about how the model you're developing fits for the context and for the question at hand, but also what some of the modeling choices you have to make are in terms of assumptions or simplifications that might mean in other contexts or in slightly different instances, the model might be less relevant for understanding the mechanisms at play. So when in doubt, really be open and transparent about potential shortcomings, and that's never going to be viewed as a negative thing as well. So great, I will end on that note. Just to maybe give a summary before we go to FAQs. We're really trying to encourage different approaches. We have a wide range of themes that we want to support research in. And I think a lot of the time what we do see is very promising projects that don't make it over the line, not because of the fundamental idea, but more so because of perhaps how that idea has been packaged or how that idea has been explained. And so in the chat, there's lots of questions about this, but there's a lot of resources that we have available online. You can also speak with some of our teams to get feedback in this process. And our hope is to help translate these promising ideas into good proposals that can get funded as well. So great. What we'll do now is we'll try to preempt some frequently asked questions. And I think we've been answering already some of them in the chat. But we'll now go through some of these and then open up for a wider Q&A. So Shahid, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Tim. Wow, I have never seen this much enthusiasm for an IGC call on a webinar. Tons of questions, really good questions. Keep them coming. Tim and Adam, if you can just answer a few of them in the chat while I go through these FAQs, that would be great. I think we've covered a lot of these FAQs, actually, so I'll just skip the ones that we've covered. We've talked about whether anyone can apply, talked about the requirements, talked about the 10 partner countries. Yes, we support research in India, Tanzania, and Yemen. I've talked about what those criteria are. Go to the website, look at the country priorities list. This one, does the IGC fund projects in health and education? It's not, health and education are not core primary thematic areas for us. However, we will fund or consider funding for projects in health and education that tie to one of our 4 themes. So for example, if you're looking at the delivery of a health intervention by the state, and you're looking at outcomes related to the efficiency of delivery, that is something that we would consider. So as long as your project is related to one of the 4 themes and one of the primary outcomes that you're measuring is strongly connected to one of our 4 themes, it doesn't matter if it's health or education. But we're not interested in the primary outcomes being in health or education. Does the IGC fund research in multiple countries? Yes, we fund research in a single country. We can fund research across 2 countries, 3 countries. We have studies that fund research globally. So, 40 country studies, 50 country studies. So there's the advantage of doing research in a single country or 2 countries is that the opportunity for policy influencing is much greater because we have country teams that work in these countries that can help connect you to policymakers and drive change at a national level. But that does not disqualify you from applying if you're interested in applying in multiple countries. Should the managing institution be based on the country of research? No, not typically. It varies. It can be based on the country of research. You can be an academic or researcher based in England, for example, and your managing institution would be the university that you're affiliated with. So there's no hard and fast rule there. Should all or any PIs, co-PIs be based in the country of research? We strongly encourage research that include local researchers. We strongly encourage mixed teams that includes a combination of local and international researchers, but these are not hard and fast sort of criteria. We will accept applications from purely international teams as well as purely local teams. I think there's an advantage if you have a team that includes a local researcher. Do you only accept projects that involve RCTs? No. Tim's just talked about it. We're looking at all methodologies, and we encourage innovation and methodology as well to move just beyond RCTs. Should I apply for the small or large grant? I've talked about this earlier. There's plenty of guidance on the website on whether you should apply for the small or large grant, and there's been several questions in the chat as well. What is IGC's policy on paying fees for researchers? Generally, we do not consider paying fees for full-time academics based in the US, the UK, or the EU. If you are a PhD student based in one of these continents or countries, then you can apply for fees, and there's a 22-day limit generally across all projects on fees, but that limit can be extended if you are a PhD student. If you are based locally in country, in, for example, South Asia or Africa, then you can put fees in your budget. Again, I would encourage you to look through the guidelines for applicants. It's on the Call for Proposals website, and it lays out very clearly what our rules are on paying fees based on your particular situation. Okay, that wraps up the presentation. There's tons of questions in the chat. Maybe what we can do is start going through some of these questions. We've already answered a lot of them in the chat box itself, but what I can do is start looking at questions and then either taking them on myself or passing them on to Tim or others in the research team. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
just start answering a few. So Alexander from
Okay.
USC had a question on whether funds should be used to only cover research costs, or if there's an ability to use such funds to pay the principal investigator or other researchers. So this will depend partially on where you are based. So if you are a PhD, if you are a researcher based in the US or Europe or in a developed country, we typically do not pay for researcher or principal investigator fees. The exception is if you are a PhD student, we do offer or are fine to give some limited payments, kind of seen as a teaching buyout in some form. But to be very clear, so in most projects, if an established faculty member from a department in the US or Europe includes fees, we would usually either ask them to remove those fees or the proposal may not be successful. Now, if you are a researcher based in an IGC country or based in a low or middle income country, we have more flexibility to fund researcher or principal investigator fees and salaries. Though note that we still do emphasize value for money quite strongly. So proposals that have disproportionate fees for principal investigators are more likely than not to be less competitive in the commissioning board process. I'm just going to answer some of these as they keep going. So there's a question about whether priority is given to proposals that hit many themes or if they target kind of a single research question or theme. So there is no distinguishing benefit from touching more themes versus one theme. Sometimes the most compelling research question is very narrow and focused and is only related to solid waste management in cities. Other times the question is still focused, but touches on several themes. And in that case, that is completely fine. So there's no priority or preference given to answering one kind of theme versus several themes. The key thing, again, is whether the question is well defined and if your approach is good for handling that question as well. So Rishabh has a question on mixed methods research. The answer is yes, we're happy to support mixed methods research, but we will be clear that, we'll be clear about our own biases as an organization, which is that we do expect at least some quantitative evidence in our proposals. So we will be looking for an ability to comment on some form of causal relationship using data. Now, many of the best proposals include a lot of qualitative scoping or qualitative surveying in order to frame future data collection exercises or to design interventions that are being put together. But to say that just a qualitative bit alone is enough is very unlikely. So mixed methods is very encouraged, but we would suggest that should not come at the cost of thinking quite seriously about the quantitative component as well. Yes, so I think this sort of relates to Joanna's question as well. So yeah, we will fully admit we are a little bit biased as an organization towards funding research and economics. But I will say we are definitely interested in kind of bringing in other disciplines alongside this. I think many of the most exciting economics papers recently, especially about things like sustainability or climate change and the environment, will have non-economists as part of proposals. So we strongly encourage this type of collaboration to have non-economics disciplines together with economists to answer these questions. And for some of these themes like environment, I think that's increasingly relevant, where you'd want to bring in geographers, or you want to bring in other professionals and scientists who can help inform and design a project. So yeah, by all means, we do encourage kind of cross-disciplinary work. But I guess one of those disciplines probably would need to be some form of economics, I'd say. Good. So Felipe asks how many proposals are submitted each year and how many are accepted. Perhaps Anam can give the figures, but it is relatively quite competitive. So we will receive in the order of, actually, okay, Anam, yes, give me the lifeline, please.
Hi, I'm Anam. I work as a research and impact officer at the research program. So last year, the approval rate was around 22%. So yeah, and that has been historically the approval rate in the past few CBs. It differs from country to country and theme to theme, but that's the average approval rate.
Great, thank you.
And just one other thing, we usually get about 400 to 500 proposals. That was part of the question.
Great. So we have another question about so if you're a PhD student based in the US, for instance, do you need to have a collaborator in an IGC country like India? No. The answer is no. You can be based fully in the US, working on a project in one of our IGC countries. That's completely fine. And a lot of our research teams are like that. We do not have a minimum or maximum number of proposals that we accept per country. Inevitably, there is just the researcher supply part of the equation, where we will receive more proposals from countries that have a stronger research environment. Think countries like India or Pakistan, for instance. So we don't have minimum or maximums, but we do try to encourage, and this is factored in when we do make our funding decisions to some extent. We do try to encourage proposals that come in and get funded in other countries as well. So we won't fund So if we have 100 proposals to fund, we won't fund all 100 in India and Pakistan. We will ensure that some of those do go to other geographies. But I should say, you should not try to think of the game theory here. So if you have a project that happens to be in India, and you're worried that this is going to be a bigger pool, don't look at it that way. We don't really say ex ante that we will fund 10 projects in India. It won't be like that. We're going to try to just balance it informally as we go.
Tim, there's a couple of questions on the energy that you might want to answer. So this question by Ahmed Amar.
Yeah, I see this. Yeah.
Okay.
So Ahmed has a question on, do you count energy consumption and transportation as equally interesting, or is it exclusively about energy and power generation, etc.? So no, I think we are interested in all aspects of energy. So electricity, so what goes into creating and generating electricity, so in terms of the fuel inputs there, but also one of the biggest drivers, not only of greenhouse gas emissions, but local pollutants, as you know, in countries, is from the transportation sector. And so we're very interested in looking at any projects that look at reducing energy consumption or emissions in transportation, whether that is about pollutants or even kind of energy efficiency type interventions as well. So we're quite interested in really all aspects of energy, fuel, electricity, etc. as well. So just I'll throw this in there because I see a few of these. We do have a wide range of resources on our website, including the proposal templates, including examples of successful projects, including examples of unsuccessful or less developed proposals as well. So please do check those with us. So we have a few questions about sample sizes and piloting. So there's no ideal sample size. We are happy to support exploratory work, which is not powered. What I mean by that is, so the sample size is probably too small to obtain statistical power to be able to conduct causal inference fully. So we're happy to support these early stage projects to test out a potential intervention. Can we implement this potentially interesting intervention before we then think about piloting it, before we then think about scaling it? So we're happy to do that. So in some sense, there's no right answer. However, if you are asking for, let's say, a larger proposal, and you're claiming that this intervention will allow us to get causal evidence on the impact of a cash transfer on incomes, then we would want to see some evidence that the sample size you have is adequate for that, which means you would want to give some demonstration of a power calculation, either based on data that you have or based on other studies in terms of the expected treatment effect sizes, and other things as well. So the answer is that there's no correct sample size, but you should make a clear case why the sample size you're suggesting is suitable for the goal of the proposal.
Can I just come in here? There is a question that's been asked a lot of times on the country teams and the response rate from the country teams. So you should ideally hear back from the country team within a week. If you don't hear back from them, then just please email us at igc.research@lsc.ac.uk and we will try and put you in touch with them. This is only for the IGC country teams.
Great. So we have a further clarification on sustainability as a cross-cutting theme versus having energy and environment as a separate theme. So we're aware that this could be slightly confusing. To be clear, so there's a question basically asking, will only proposals based on climate change or the environment be funded? The answer is no. So we are trying as an organization to encourage projects that might conventionally not think about climate change or environmental issues to consider whether they are relevant and how they may be relevant for sustainable growth, but that is not a requirement. Now, in some geographies, like in India, we are strongly encouraging that in this call for proposals, that in India, we are encouraging that proposals have an explicit focus on sustainable growth. But for our existing 10 IGC partner countries, you are more than welcome to, and we would only encourage you to submit a conventional, let's say, development proposal. It does not need to factor in climate change. So that's just an area we want to build out our pipeline of research, but is by no means a requirement. So to get a full grant is a prerequisite to pilot the idea with IGC as well. No. So we are very happy to fund a project that has obtained pilot evidence from somewhere else. We want to have an understanding that there's evidence that the intervention you're proposing has been trialed and is proven to be somewhat successful in terms of, again, your ability to implement it, and in terms of being able to demonstrate that there is some reason to expect that we would see effects as we scale this up. But we do not need to fund this as a pilot beforehand. So what level of collaboration should the PIs have with the partner IGC institutions? So we encourage all prospective research teams, if there is a relevant IGC country office, to reach out to that country office and discuss your proposal with them. You do not have to do this. It will help you in the sense that it'll help develop your project idea, help align your proposal with the country's priorities. But at the same time, every year we do get proposals, which we do fund, which have not had extensive conversation or collaboration with the country teams. So we would encourage you to see them as a resource and to utilize that resource, but it is not a necessary requirement that you do reach out to these country teams. And so in many ways, IGC tries to help facilitate research in our countries by having these country offices. And maybe just a point to add is that you should see them as being useful at all stages. So maybe you already have a full proposal and you want feedback on that from them. Maybe you're thinking about developing a proposal. You have a research idea in this area, but you don't know exactly what the precise intervention should be or what the data might be, or you might not have the right link in government or with other stakeholders. So the country teams can also be helpful in that early stage to make connections and help develop the project with you. So you should see them at all stages as being a potential source of support for you. Okay, so does the proposal need to be signed off by the managing institution before submission? So this will depend on your specific institution. In most cases, certainly in universities, it is often a requirement that the university administration reviews the budgets, usually a few days before the submission of the proposal. So please check with your own institution's guidelines and regulations, but in many cases, when you're submitting budgets, you do need to have the local institution review and approve those budgets that you do send to us. This will only save time because we often have instances where after a project gets approved or gets funding, then there's a long back and forth between institutions and IGC, and that can delay contracting and the implementation of projects. Yes, so can the unit of analysis be individuals? Absolutely. We are interested both in individual level outcomes, firm level outcomes, location level outcomes. So we're really encouraging all levels of study. And again, the key thing is for the unit of analysis, are you able to measure the outcomes? Are you able to make a clear mapping from the intervention to these individuals, so on and so forth. Okay, so are proposals from non-IGC countries like India eligible for full grants, or are they only eligible for small grants or pilots? So these are eligible. So if you're applying on a non-IGC country, you can do a small grant, you can do a big grant, you can do an exploratory study, you can do a scale up. Everything is on the table. But to emphasize again, if it is not an IGC country, the criteria for selection will be a bit higher. So we will be assessing we'll place greater emphasis on the potential academic impact for that proposal. And it could be an early stage project which is covering many countries and doesn't have a single IGC country, or maybe it's an earlier stage exploratory project on Nepal, but has lots of academic potential. We would still fund that. Same thing for a large scale grant that tries to really evaluate a big RCT. If it's not in an IGC country, that's okay. But we'd really want to then have a strong sense that the product of this research piece will be a strong publication in like an economics or kind of general interest social science journal. So there's another question on if you're putting together a small grant application to fund a pilot, what supporting evidence should you provide to make it compelling? So the first thing you want to do is really motivate the context. And this can be stating some facts. So, it can talk about how the price of electricity in this country have gone up by this much in the last 3 years, making it extremely unaffordable for the poor. I then want to see how the rising electricity prices affects the behaviors and decisions made by households in this part of Pakistan. I therefore plan to do blah, 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 something like that. So you can really just motivate why the question is policy relevant and timely for that context. But then obviously then also keep that academic literature in mind. So it could be that you motivate the policy issue, but then make sure you take that policy issue into our wider understanding of how electricity sectors in developing countries face a lot of constraints in terms of political economy or limited investments to be able to make electricity affordable for all, for instance. So really, it doesn't need to be administrative data. It can be even high-level indicators. It can be just headline figures from newspaper articles. It can be qualitative stuff. That's fine, but really just motivate it in that sense.
Tim, we're just wrapping up now. There's just one question that it'd be great if you can answer it. So it's on common pitfalls applicants or researchers should avoid when applying for the IGC's full research grants. And because we're closing in 1 minute, we can just take this as the last question.
I think the main thing is, number one, the proposal is not clear. So we don't know what you're answering. We don't know how your proposed methodology helps you answer that question. So that's the number one thing you should ensure you do, that someone external to show the proposal to somebody else, have them read it. They should have a clear understanding of what you want to do. Number two, a big hurdle is that often there's not enough thought devoted to whether your methodology can appropriately answer that question. So if you're fundamentally asking a question which revolves around establishing a causal relationship, often we just have proposals say, we run this regression, we include some controls, and this tells us the effect of X on Y. We want to see a bit more than that in a proposal, especially if you're relying on other methodologies that require just more assumptions. So we want to see more discussions on whether your methodology is suitable to answer the question, what some of the potential concerns might be. So this approach might have this issue. In response to this concern, I plan on doing this to then further check if the initial regression or the initial approach is kind of supporting the conclusion that this effect of X on Y is the following. So really, really go a level deeper in your empirical methodology to think concretely about different things that you'll do to showcase that the results and evidence you're generating are valid and robust. I don't know, I'll pitch you, I'll let you come in some other common pitfalls and some things to avoid.
I guess you've covered the research side. So just, yeah, I mean, pay attention to the 6 criteria. We value all 6 of those criteria equally. On the research design side, Tim has sort of gone through some of the common pitfalls, but we equally value the potential for the project to influence policy. I would strongly, as a final thing to say, actually, I would very strongly encourage everyone on this call who's interested in applying to the grant to get in touch with the IGC country team. We have data that actually shows that your chance of being successful is crucially dependent on whether you share your proposal with the IGC country team well in advance of the submission date, so that there can be a dialogue between you and the country team to sort of like help design the proposal and refine it. So please do that. That is definitely one of the pitfalls when submitting is not speaking to the country team.
Wonderful. So what I think we'll do is, for those who've typed a question in the chat, I think there's 17 left or a few of them left. We'll finish responding to them now. But I think we'll close the responses, the live responses for the webinar now. I mean, sorry, I actually indicated on one that I would respond live. So, okay, very final point. So yes, we are interested in energy environment with a focus on energy and greenhouse gases, but we do care about adaptation, and climate adaptation is a central theme for us as well. So we'd be happy to fund that. Okay, so thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful to hear all these questions. We will be hosting another open day, which may be a bit repetitive for you to come again, but please do, if you have further questions, please do attend that. The contact emails and everything are online. For you to have any follow-up questions, please send us an email. And lastly, we will be sending a feedback survey after the end of this webinar. So please do take a few minutes to fill that out. That'll be very helpful for us for subsequent iterations. So thank you, everybody. And we look forward to every single one of you submitting a proposal. So, maybe that, we encourage everyone to submit. So, okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
The link to the bread course was not shared, so maybe we can add that.
Wait, are they still online? Yeah.
All right, I think we're through the list. Thank you for those who are still here. And we will be in touch, and do not hesitate to send us an email for further clarification. So
Thanks.
thank you, everybody. Have a nice rest of the day wherever you may be.
Thanks. Bye.